I'd like to welcome you, Sama, and let you know that I'm so thankful that you're joining us today, as I've been following you for quite a while on YouTube, and your astrological insights and highly accurate long time-term predictions made me contact you for a consultation last week, and I found your advice so actionable that I have already adopted it to my own trading strategy. So thank you for that.
Good to hear. Good to hear. It's always beautiful when people are implementing and applying the work that I discuss. The knowledge from really Vedic astrology, financial astrology, to have that extra piece of confluence to one's trading strategy. It really works well for individuals like yourself that are already familiar with markets. Sometimes I'm a bit cautious or even abrasive towards those who are looking at financial astrology as a means of get rich quick kind of. I mean, yes, that can be used for that, but it's very useful when you intertwine it with a proper understanding of risk management, which you obviously have. Again, always awesome to see people jumping in and applying this stuff immediately. So beautiful to be here with you and support, because as you know, Jupiter is in Gemini, which really helps with sharing facts and quick information. This is an event that is in a short-term distance away, 2 weeks away, right? So sharing quick facts amongst a small group, very Geminian actually, and very expanded by Jupiter during this year. So you might be doing a lot more of this between now and next June. And if you do, let me know. If I'm available, I'll
I
show
hope
up.
so. Thanks a lot. Well, like I said, your consultation really surprised me with, its depth in more than just financial ways. And I think that may also be why you have attracted what I understand to be some big high net worth individuals and institutions taking your advice. And I looked into it, some of your predictions, and I found some quite remarkable ones that I just like to highlight here. In February of 2023, you predicted that the S&P 500 would reach 4,600 by summer, which was, as I understand, very much contrary to common belief.
Yeah,
And then you accurately forecasted Bitcoin's price movement on several occasions, like the sideways movement that followed the upward surge in August of 23. And you also anticipate a correction in the S&P 500 in August 23 after the rapid ascent in July. Yet another spot-on prediction. So it seems like you have a great track record, and I'm very curious to hear what you're thinking of the topic we're bringing up today. There's these predictions and anticipation of a major event in July, and I'm very curious to hear what the stars and aspects are showing for that period and maybe extending throughout July.
sure, absolutely. This collaboration is very interesting in many ways because, as you know, with finance, one of the things we look at in our field is confluence, in the sense of, yes, one thing might say, okay, this asset might go up or XYZ might occur. But when we have three things saying that, or five things, or seven things, then our tension becomes, pulled towards something. And that is how astrologers read charts as well. Typically, we're looking for at least three aspects that are telling us the same thing in a chart before, and this is for professional astrologers, this is typically what they do, is then when they see that, then they'll go ahead and tell their client, I think this is likely what's your situation, right?
Yes.
And so to have the people that you've brought on, some of them looking specifically at that date from different disciplines is of interest to me, and is a part of why I've joined here today, is just to hear these different perspectives and to learn. Because the 15th is a date in which the planet Mars will be conjoined together with the planet Uranus. And I will explain what those things mean. The fact that that is actually happening on the 15th, and that people who are not astrologers, I believe that they call it remote viewing, right? They're doing different techniques in which they're trying to get glimpses of what may be occurring in the future. For them to be pointing out the 15th and not be astrologers was interesting to me. And so that's part why I'm here. The placement of where this conjoined conjunction is happening. First, let's back up and talk about how aspects work. So believe it or not, astrology done well is quite mathematical. right? It's not as random, hoo-ha, hokey pokey as some people might present it on certain apps, TikTok or whatever, for whatever reasons. And that's fine. Let them have fun. But in terms of what we're looking at, we want precision. And so part of that means we need to look at angular relationships between planets. And those angles need to be within particular degrees in order for them to manifest or actually exhibit their characteristics in the world, right? The plug actually needs to be in the hole for the power to flow, right? So aspects in astrology will then represent the angular relationships between planets, between one chart and what's actually happening above, which comes with the saying, as above, so below. And that will influence how these two planets or people or events or situations interact with each other. Similarly explained, or very easily explained, if the sun is on the other side of the planet, it's nighttime and you're probably asleep. It's affecting you in that way, right? But that's just the sun. That's just one of the planetary bodies. There's many others, right? So how is their placement affecting us and what's going on the planet? There's 5 major aspects or angles, when they're precise, that talk about that. One is called the conjunction, and that's when there's a 0 degree. That's 0 degrees because the two planets are basically considered to be on top of each other, let's say. Then we have the sextile, which is 60 degrees. We have the square, which is 90 degrees. We have the trine, which is 120. And then we have the opposition, which is 180. Okay. When the two planets are basically on top of each other, they're considered to be conjoined, and that is the blending of the two energies of those planets, which can be very powerful and can often indicate new beginnings. Okay, this is what Mars and Uranus are doing. Mars is known as the planet of action, and that's associated with energy, drive, and determination. And that's going to talk about our physical vitality. It's testosterone in the body and how we assert ourselves, right? All genders have testosterone in the body, just for those who didn't know, right? So, and we all want things. We all go after things in life, and Mars will dictate that. So if Mars is in a place where Mars is very fiery, if Mars is in a sign or a place that's quite watery, then we might see an individual who's not as assertive as one who might have Mars in the sign of, let's say, Leo or Aries, right, which are fiery signs. You put fire along with fire, that's going to catalyze it, right? That's how the elements work. And there's 4 elements, as you all know. There's a ball of fire in the sky. We live on Earth, we drink water, we breathe air. Those are the 4 elements, and they affect our behavior. They are what make up physical reality, our physical body, buildings, places, locations, this whole entire experience, okay? So again, Mars is associated with the fire element and how we assert ourselves. Now, the planet Uranus is interesting because of all the visible planets that we can see, either with a telescope or not, Uranus is the one that, instead of it being in a line with all the other ones, it's rotating on an axis, going its own way, which of course will then describe its characteristics in those who are quite affected by those planets. So you can predict already, for those of you who are new to this, that Uranus is known for the planet of change, innovation, being unconventional, quite shocking, actually, when its aspects are exact. It often represents sudden and unexpected events. It's been an exact aspect in many of the earthquake events, or in building collapses, or in terror attacks, or electronic disruptions or revolutions in general, like the French Revolution. Because again, we're talking about change, innovation, and rebellion and originality. It's a quite youthful energy as well, and often represents breakthroughs in things being different than the status quo. So part of what the concern we have is with these two planets being conjoined is Mars is the god of war, and Uranus is unconventional and transformational and revolutionary. So that can point to some of the things we might see. Are the youth going to be involved? Might we see building collapses or terror attacks? Might we see a new technological revolution? Might we see, and then how do these energies blend with the god of war, the planet of action, desire, energy, drive, determination, going after we want, Mars? Will we see new technology being used in global conflicts related to war, or related towards people getting what they want? I'm curious to see what that looks like on a personal level, because that's always going to reflect on the individual level. There could be new technologies new pieces of equipment or new thoughts or new ideas, or the youth rebelling themselves, creating things that for people's own desires or ability to go after what they want. We might see that on a personal lower level.
Mhm.
But on a larger societal level, this very much is going to involve nations like the USA and Israel and Russia and Ukraine, because I've seen that this conjunction is lighting up their charts as well. And I'll talk a little bit about some of that, specifically starting with the United States. But it's important to understand too that Uranus, again, with this energy blended, will probably see some political shifts, likely some protests, probably involving the youth, some social unrest, which we've already seen, and you've been familiar with my content. So you've heard me say that social unrest is trending upward, and you've also seen that as well. Stepping back to even add to that, we've seen a big deal made out of the eclipse in April, right? For those who aren't as familiar with astrology, some of you might have reacted by saying, why the hell is this eclipse such a big deal? Why is the government talking about the eclipse? Why is the government saying I should store up water? Because they're looking at these things. They are.
Sure.
I know this is shocking or weird to some of you, but some of the timing of some of these things are in alignment with astrological conjunctions, squares, oppositions, and trines on purpose. Okay.
In Denmark,
So,
they are doing that.
Yeah.
They got a flyer distributed to every household.
Yeah.
Prepared for 3 days, stock up.
Now, I've never seen anything like that for an eclipse before, but the reason why we saw that is because of what they were doing with this eclipse. This eclipse in particular, why don't you go ahead and give me hosting capabilities so I can share my screen? I'll show you guys an image.
Yes.
This eclipse actually passed over the United States and Mexico and parts of France and parts of Canada. Where an eclipse, particularly a total eclipse, where an eclipse is passing over is going to show us what part of the world or which nations are going to be affected for that immediate week, as well as the next 6 months out, and even also then the next 18 months out as well. So that's a long radius, it's a long range of time, 18 months, it's a year and a half, sure. And there's several locations that have been affected by this, and we'll pull those up on the screen.
Yes.
So I'll go ahead and pull that up right now, and you guys will be able to see that. And what you'll see is how the eclipse path is covering the United States here, Mexico here, going over the Atlantic Ocean, and then fizzling over into Europe there. Right?
Yes.
This line gives us 100% of the eclipse path, right? And then these lines too are about 75%, and then it starts to fizzle out from that range there.
Interesting.
Yes, very interesting, right? So not every eclipse is impacting the United States. Not every eclipse is a total eclipse, and therefore not every eclipse can be used to energetically affect, the countries that are under that eclipse path. So this one was chosen in particular because there's a lot going on energetically with the United States right now as well, which you all can see.
Yes.
Our economy is in a precarious, interesting situation. It seems like it's going well on the surface, but if you've seen my videos, you know underneath the hood that sure, the S&P is a weighted basket being held up by a couple of tech stocks, which are ruled by Uranus, right? And the technological components also represented by the zodiac sign of Gemini, which the planet of expansion, Jupiter, a gas giant, is in currently. Jupiter expands the locations that it's in. Gemini is related to markets because it's an air sign, and I'm literally pushing tones on my breath to communicate to you. So air, the element of air is related to communication. Okay. And it's related to markets and the transfer of information and the flow of currency as well. So Jupiter is going to expand markets while it's in Gemini. Yes, there are other planets in other locations, which is what makes financial astrology an art and the thing to look at and the consideration of, okay, well, how long is Jupiter here? What other planets or aspects is Jupiter being affected by? What about the planet that reduces things? What about the planet that expands things randomly, And then you look at that whole picture to understand what is occurring. Okay. So why the eclipse path is interesting and why that is being use is that America will show up on the let's say that the world stage in terms of large events when these eclipses occur or get activated.
Mm-hmm.
And so we saw some of that over the last couple of months in which France had their elections and Mexico had their elections, and we saw that they were under this eclipse path. I can
Yes.
bring that up again just in case you guys didn't see that. With my cursor here, you can see that Mexico was involved and that France was involved as well, even though the line didn't extend all the way through, and that the United States was involved. Has the United States had their elections yet? No, but we will soon. Mexico had one of the bloodiest elections they've ever seen. And Macron is saying that, hey, we're going to do this over, right? So we're seeing that the leadership, which the sun being eclipsed is just what that manifests as. On the mundane level, or on the global level, the sun is going to represent the rulership or the leadership of that chart or nation in the event of nation states, when we're looking at it from an astrological, energetic perspective.
Okay.
So will the leaders of these nations be eclipsed? That's some of what we need to be concerned about or looking at. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this conjunction, we're going to take a look now at an actual astrological chart for the USA, like I said we would. And what this tells us is that this is taking place in the 6th house of the United States. How do houses work? In astrology, a birth chart, a natal chart, an event chart, any chart is going to be divided into 12 distinct sections known as houses, because they're going to represent different aspects of life or of the energy and of the experiences. Okay. And this is going to be based on the Earth's 24-hour rotation on its axis. And the sign that's rising on the horizon is going to dictate the energy of that chart or that physical body, that person, that company, that event. All right. For the United States, the sign rising was Sagittarius, which is changeable fire. That is fire that is transforming into something else. Okay. And this happens in a counterclockwise direction here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So each of these houses are going to focus on different areas of life. And the 6th place is going to relate to work, daily routines, employees, subordinates, people under you, people who report to you, things that are of an issue to you that you have to deal with. It relates to the small intestine, and it has a lot to do with things like paperwork or service or things that are kind of irritable. Things that are irritable but are a necessity, like taking a shower, brushing your teeth, doing your taxes, managing your budget, having a military, being of service, having nurses, going to the doctor, going to the dentist, waiters, waitresses, menus, washing dishes, forks, put your shoes here before you go in the house. All those little things are actually related to the 6th house, because if we don't do them, then our life kind of falls apart in many ways. If you don't brush your teeth, you're going to have effects there. If you don't shower, you're going to have effects there. If you don't have a military, if you don't have borders, if you don't have accounting of your finances, you're going to have effects with these things. If you don't take care of your intestines, your colon, right, you're going to have problems. This conjunction is happening on the 6th place for the United States. That is going to point towards potential health issues. That is going to point towards potential issues towards the workforce and the United States military.
Okay.
Because these are the things that the 6th house represents. Okay.
Yes.
And this is going to be different per each chart. This is in the house of Taurus. And Taurus is an earth sign. It's the most stable earth sign. And that's going to relate to currency and the borders of our country. So there could be changes in finances, agriculture, and land to the United States. And some of the concern I have is, with World War II, which Uranus was in the sign of Taurus when World War II occurred in the late 30s and early 40s, in that era where the world was ran by dictators. And we can see similarities now with what I said earlier about the elections, people being thrown in jail or assassinated because they want to run their country. It's like, okay, well, you're gone now. You've disappeared, right? And that was the thing in the 30s and 40s, right? You can find images of Yusuf Stalin standing next to somebody, and then All of a sudden, there's another image and they're not there anymore. I thought they were in that, right? It's like that Berenstein Bears thing where it's like you thought this was going on, but actually your memory is wrong here. No, 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 you're remembering this wrong because they're editing things out, right? And we see that happening with the internet as well, with fact checking or with certain things that were once posted that are getting removed. So we see remnants of how history can repeat. It's not going to rhyme because planets will be in different areas, right? They're not all going to be in the same place at the same time the way they were in the 30s and 40s. We've moved on. We've learned certain things. Society's progressed, right? And we see that as well above in the charts. And so with this sixth house, my concern is the reason I talk about World War II is America joined because of Pearl Harbor, a so-called attack on American soil. It wasn't quite American soil. They chose something, American enough, and that was Hawaii, right? And so my concern is, could there be a potential attack on U.S. soil to drag the United States into the war? Public defense and health is related to the sixth place. So will this be an attack on U.S. soil? I'm not necessarily saying it will be that. But what is interesting is that the remote viewers talked about something that seemed very much like a UFO, and that is very Uranian.
Yes.
And they also talked about some war elements, which is Mars as well. These two planets are coming together. These two energies are blending, and they are happening under the constellation of a fixed star known as Algol, or in Arabic called Al Ghul, which is known as, what is that actually called? Algol. It's related to the head of a demon. That's what it is, actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Al-Ghul, actually, in Arabic, is the head of a demon. And so what Al-Ghul is concerned with, when we have planets in the location of a fixed star constellation, it's very similar to you being affected by any building you enter or location you visit. Your energies will merge with that too. So not only are the energies of Mars and Uranus blending, they're blending in this place in which the mythology is related to Medusa. It's actually related to some mythologies or disciplines of thought look at Algol as mythology related to a virgin who gets raped and then gets punished for that rape. She then becomes Medusa and then starts turning people into stone. I'm butchering the mythology, I'm sure, but funny enough, Algol is related to decapitation. So we could see, because a lot of the world leaders are involved with some of the energies we're seeing. Will we see someone, I don't know if we'll see a beheading or if we'll see someone get fired. We might see that with one of the world leaders of the countries in this eclipse path. And that again includes Mexico, the United States, and also Israel is a part of this as well in this eclipse path. Again, the sign rising on the horizon will affect the life path of that chart or event. And Israel's rising sign is Libra. And the eclipses are occurring in Libra and Aries. What's interesting about the eclipses is that they are represented by a dragon that has a mouth that is insatiable because it has no stomach. And then there's the stomach, which just keeps excreting. And it's not receiving anything. It's just letting go of things. So how that's looked at in the chart is the North Node, or the mouth of the dragon, is basically a plus sign in the sense of we want more of that. And the energy of human beings is such that it's almost insatiable. We are karmically pulled in that direction. We can't help it. An example of this is 2020, 2021 during the pandemic, when the North Node was in the sign of Gemini, again related to markets and communication. What happened then? Companies like Apple and Amazon, their valuations went through the roof. We were all on our phones. We were all looking at case numbers. Everyone was watching the news. I wasn't, because I don't watch the news, but I was on social media a lot. That was my version of it, and many people too, because you weren't allowed to go anywhere. So our energies and attentions, whether we liked it or not, became very Geminian. You didn't want to homeschool your kid? Well, they're home. What are you going to do? You don't have a computer at home? Well, maybe I'll go buy a computer so that the public school system can teach the kid online, right? So that's what people were going through. You had a brick and mortar business. Well, the government's saying you can't open your doors anymore. So people were forced to either go online in many cases or shut down. That's the North Node in Gemini, karmically forcing us to become more Geminian, more technologically savvy, whether we liked it or not.
Yes.
That is the effect of planets and energies and signs, is whether you like it or not, winter is coming or summer is coming. And so knowing this stuff is what gives us this huge advantage of being able to prepare and communicate this stuff. And
Okay.
so with the North Node being in the sign of Aries, Aries is the first spark of fire.
Mm-hmm.
It's very Martian, it's very Mars-like, it's very childlike.
Right.
And so it's very impulsive.
Mm-hmm.
So energies can be sparked off that aren't necessarily completed or that we even intended to spark off, or if we had taken a moment to pause or think about it, maybe we wouldn't have said that or done that or hit that person or slept with that person or instigated this war or started this whatever, right? Because there's a youthfulness with Aries or a learning or an impulsivity of let's just go, let's just get
Mm-hmm.
started, or it's fiery, it's very quick. And
Does that
Libra,
also apply to a collective context,
absolutely.
or is it just a single leader taking that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We will see this on the individual level, in which people might be a little more, let's say, individualized. They might be a little more prioritizing of self. They might be more physically active, more youthful. People might be, I've actually seen a lot of people, believe it or not, throughout the world losing weight during this,
Mm-hmm.
which is very Aries in the sense of like some people are being more active and there's a leanness to the fire signs or the fire
Right.
component as well, you know. And then on the opposite axis, if the North Node is insatiable, it's pulling us there. If we're becoming more independent, if we're becoming more childlike, if we're becoming more focused on what our needs are,
Mm-hmm.
the opposite axis is Libra, and that is the cardinal phase of the air component, which has to do with communication and balance and sharing, because that's ruled by Venus, which we all know of the Mars and Venus archetypes, whether you are familiar with astrology or not.
Mm-hmm.
Venus being more feminine in the sense of what does the community want? What is a way to relate in which Venus rules the magnetic component of of our physical reality. The electric component is going to be the communicative stuff. That's more Mercury, right? Electromagnetism is how our universe works. So the magnetic component is Venus, is how we get pulled into things. The desirable things are Venusian, right? And Mars is how we go after the desirable things.
Right.
Okay.
So you are saying that even though this has a very individualistic expression, that it can also come out in a collective context, like a planned attack in a group setting.
So what I'm getting to is that Israel is a Libra rising sign.
Mhm.
So the opposite of Israel is Aries, which means it's either its enemies or its partners or its allies. They will need to focus more on the opposite axis other than themselves, because with them is the South Node, which represents excretion, the letting go or the dissolving of things.
Yes.
So that means that they have some issues, and there will be another eclipse this September, which will trigger some of the dissolving of Israel and some of the independence of their allies and enemies as well.
Yeah.
That's where I was headed.
From what I understand, you're saying that this expression of Mars, to that extent, is also an expression of losing control.
Yeah.
You're
And
losing it somehow.
in their context, you can say that, because what the North Node, again, it's karmic. We're forced there. So what Israel will have to do is their attention will be forced on their enemies and their allies and on people basically opposing them. Attention has to go there. And this is with Aries, with conflict, with people wanting their independence. Israel wants their concerns met too, but their allies and enemies want their concerns met as well. So they must deal with issues related to the North Node forcing their attention there until this eclipse series in Libra and Aries is over.
So you
Now,
also see that apply to this possible event,
absolutely,
this childlike eruption
absolutely.
of energy is also a sign of losing mind or losing control in the expression of the event, so to say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because Mars is involved.
Hmm.
And Aries is ruled by Mars. In the same sense, you could say Aries is the territory or home of Mars. Like you own your home, Mars owns Aries. And so, because the eclipses are happening there, what happens to Mars will trigger the events that are happening in Aries, and the North Node is there.
Mm.
Now, when we bring in this particular aspect on the 15th for Israel, this is occurring in their 8th house, which has to do with transformations and crises and upheaval. And this is also squaring personal planets in their nation's chart. So Netanyahu's probably in trouble here, and the people will likely be pissed off or affected by him or something. They might switch him out, actually, because this is occurring near Israel's sun. And like we talked about earlier, the sun will represent the rulership or the leadership. Okay. And then, of course, they have the eclipses happening this September. So from July 15th to the end of September, they're going to go through a lot of upheaval and change. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, related to the US, we talked about how this is going to impact health and stuff like that. I had my researcher take a look at Biden's chart, and she said that this is impacting his health. Surprise, surprise. We've all kind of seen that already with the recent debate. And so we're all aware, if we weren't already, that he's not fit to lead. He has a Pluto opposition, which has to do with garbage and death and transformation and rebirth, opposing him, and planets squaring his 4th house of foundations. So there's a lot of difficulty in his chart. He too might disappear for whatever reason or drop out of the situation between July 15th and the end of September. Okay. We took a look at Russia, and while they're not quite in the eclipse path, we looked at this conjunction of Mars versus Mars blended with Uranus on the 15th. And this is occurring in their 10th house, which is the most visible house. It's the house on top of the chart. And so that's basically midday. That's like noon, where you can't miss the sun. You look up, you see it. So Russia very visibly will be involved in what is occurring, which is interesting to note.
Sure.
And the 10th house relates to authority figures. The first house, which we've talked a lot about, which will be the sign where the horizon, with the sign on the horizon, what's rising. The 4th house, which is foundations, which we've talked about. I just talked about that for Biden. The 7th house, which we talked about for Israel, which has to do with others, and the 10th house, the house above, those 4 relate to manifestation. When planets are there, either in the natal chart or transiting, either moving at that current moment in time, when we see planets there, they are particularly active. Okay. And so this conjunction happening in Russia's 10th is interesting. And it's also happening, oddly enough, in Ukraine's 4th house, which is opposite the 10th. So that's going to relate to their foundations, the actual homes, the safety and security of the people there in the sign of Medusa or the head of the demon, right? So the people there are likely to be disturbed. Russia's likely to be very visibly involved. We're seeing Israel being impacted, and we're also seeing Biden maybe disappearing out of the picture. Uranus also represents nuclear power, which is interesting. And again, a lot of the people on this collaboration have talked about UFOs being involved. I've mentioned the military involvement as it relates to the United States. So there's a lot of moving pieces here, and I'm sure as they go over their sections, people in the comment section watching, or even those a part of this collaboration, might be taking note of what are the commonalities between the different speakers that continue to come up, because like we mentioned earlier, confluence is key as it comes to looking at probability. I'm not here to say anything's definitively going to happen, but I look at probability, right? And that's what goes into a lot of the predictions you shared earlier coming true, is what's most probable here. Uranus speaks of disruption, and so does Mars. A disruptive event is very likely to occur here, all right? So I'm very curious to hear what the others have to share and say, but I would not be surprised if we saw new technology or something related to military involvement in which there is some kind of either UFO or some kind of something strange Uranus, something rebellious or unconventional Uranus, which gets disturbed or attacked down Mars, which could be either we're shooting down a craft, or the military somehow is either protecting or investigating or shrouding or hiding, because the 6th house also too, this is happening. Again, that's the small intestines of the body. This is happening at the microscopic level, what the sixth house represents. It represents fine nitty gritty details and
Yes.
hermits and people who are like engineers are working behind the scenes. So that, as I say that now, that makes me think of drones, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Drones are possible. Pluto in Aquarius supports that. So there might be either drone involvement, UFO involvement. Again, the sixth house is related to health. So there could be something at the microscopic level related to health that affects the people.
Mm-hmm.
There could also be, again, Uranus and Mars in the sign of Taurus. Taurus was related to the land. So the physical land of the United States could be affected, and currencies as well. So those are the things that I would be looking at. And I think there would definitely be a disruption, Mars and Uranus, of one of those sectors, particularly for the nations that I described.
Mm-hmm.
Because, again, those are occurring in angles of manifestation for those countries.
Yes.
Any questions there? I know I kind of went through a lot,
If
but
we are zooming in on July, and particularly mid-July, do you see any significant developments in the financial markets that could correlate to such an event?
you know, on at a high level, I look at the beginning of July as quite bullish or upward, but going into this event, there will be a rippling of that in which typically when there's an event that scares people in the world, markets respond negatively. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a bit of a pullback. On the larger scale, we are still in a bull market. That has not changed.
Uh,
And election cycles are funny. You know, I share this a lot with private clients that there are actual charts of liquidity that you can look at, and they're all ready to break out if they haven't broken out already. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of the issues the United States has this September leads to liquidity events that end up supporting markets in the future, which we can talk about, you know, the end of the year 2025 at another time. But
yeah.
the short term, I see July as pretty bullish going into this event, and then this event having some pullback kind of manifestation in the markets. You
It
know,
also correlates to what surprised me in Clif High's prediction that there would actually be a positive market response post event.
still in a bull market.
Something would come in and lift the markets according to his linguistic prediction.
Well, again, Jupiter is still in Gemini, and that's one of those slower moving energies in which if we see an impact by a shorter moving energy, which Mars can do that. Mars is very much like a month to month kind of impact on markets, and it can really affect the shorter term swings. So can the moon. You know, this is more of the financial astrology stuff here. But the larger, longer term aspects will kind of dictate more the longer term trends. And so there is still a bull market in play, even though we will see volatility. Uranus itself is very much, if I could name a planet of volatility, Uranus is probably one of them. Mars is as well. So these two in particular, markets will react in a way that's basically a zigzag. There's going to be confusion. People aren't going to know whether to be bullish or bearish because of what occurs, you know, and then eventually when people realize that life has to continue, so will the markets, you know.
Yes. Do you
You know,
see all markets react in the same way, or do you see
I
some
do.
moving in
I see
opposite
some of this
directions?
I see some of this volatility actually breaking some of the correlations we're used to, although the firm ones will still be intact because they have to.
Mm,
That is Gemini in the sense of different thought or different ideas or different perspectives.
mm,
And so we're already seeing this with central banks. One of the predictions you've heard me make probably is that the US is likely not to raise their rates throughout 2024. So far they haven't, but other central banks have. And so that's a bit of the Jupiter and Gemini flavor of different perspectives or moving away from the status quo of let's all follow the Fed in America from 2008 during the Pluto and Capricorn era to now. Pluto moving into Aquarius as of last year and firmly will do that in the beginning of next year. We're
mm,
seeing now a shift in this big centralization to things being more decentralized, which is also helping tech stocks and crypto
mm.
as well. You know, so I would see some markets potentially even bearish for a little bit and some even being bullish in response. But overall, with Jupiter and Gemini affecting markets as a whole, we are still in a general bull market. And I've talked about this in videos you've seen. This is because where is money going to go? Money has to go somewhere. Where's it going to go? If there's bombs going off in the east, money's going to go to the west. But where in the west? It's going to go to American companies. It's not, the bond market. This is really a sovereign bond crisis, really, because we see who these leaders are, right? Who has confidence in these countries. But if I need to put my money somewhere, it's better off in an American company than with Sleepy Joe or people getting decapitated or arrested or thrown in jail or whatever you have, whatever the situation is for whatever country, right? So this is what we're seeing is a bond crisis that's pushing money into American stocks for the short term.
Right. We often hear, should it be gold or should it be Bitcoin, and what are the advantages of either? Do you see this period starting to crystallize more their position in the coming years over this event, or is that further out? Is gold still going to be parked? Is Bitcoin going to let loose? Where are we in the race between the two as storage of value?
I don't look at the two as being in a race. I think that would have me
In the
getting
sense that some may play,
way into other
some may
things
play
here.
on both horses. I'm just thinking, is there any holdups?
So you had a multi-pronged question here in terms of whether this event will affect both assets and what are the long-term, let's say, trajectories in terms of all that I just shared related to these two assets. Both are going to respond favorably throughout the decade as we go through what we're going through, right? This has to play itself out. Earlier, we were talking about the Vedas, and from that perspective, there's a yuga that we're in, and that's going to relate to essentially. I'm kind of speaking to you here, Karsten. The rule of Shudras, really, the rule of the common person, communism.
Yeah.
Right? So we need to go through that and go, oh, this doesn't work, right? So that itself is going to lend itself to silver, and that's going to lend itself to gold and to real estate, because again, we are in a sovereign bond crisis, and so the leadership is shifting from strong leaders, which would exist in a particular yuga. We're not in that one, right? And so the game is looking as we need to transition to communism. Bitcoin is actually a huge part of that, in which people get more familiar with the tokenization of the whole entire world and with digital assets in general. So that is in many ways why it's being pushed by institutions. There's going to be a switch, I'm sure, with central bank digital currencies in which they then start to push that. And if they want to then try crypto or tax it, which there will be an increase in taxation. That is part of what happens cyclically with the decline of fiat, is literally walls get built. It's like, don't leave this country. We'll build a wall. We'll tax you. No, don't leave my high taxes. Don't leave. You see it with California, right? It's electric vehicles for everyone because they want to be able to shut down your vehicle. They're not going to say that, but that's what they want. And they want to be able to have more control over their citizens. But now they're losing tax revenue. So now we have to charge mileage. And that's all they do. That's all they do is sit around and think of ways to,
Right.
So that's that.
So for the financial minds, what I hear you saying is that we are looking at a continued bull market over the coming months. But if such an event is there, of course, there will be a dip, but we will see a rise on the other side. We are not entering a long-term recession as a consequence of the event astrologically seen. Or
We're not entering a recession due to the event, but we are going to enter bearishness. I think there will be a bearish response to this, particularly, I think there'll be a bearish response to this event in the short term. We'll continue higher, but then there will be continuations as a result of what happens on the 15th, in which we'll see bearishness in months like September, maybe even late August. That's my high-level prediction. And I'll get into this stuff more in my newsletter, obviously, with more time. And, there's other speakers who want to share too, but we're still in a bull.
Also the scope of what we are doing here today is looking towards the election. So With that, I think you have covered the stars and the horizon. And personally, I feel very relieved from hearing your interpretation and outlook. It gives
Yeah.
some confidence that it's possible to navigate
Mm.
in spite of the
It will be navigated.
unpredictability of what may happen in July.
And I will share too, there are some signatures. The moon is in Scorpio, which is very emotionally intense. It's not directly opposing this Mars Uranus conjunction happening on the 15th,
Mhm.
but it's at play. And so that emotional intensity is just something to, because the moon is there and that represents the public, I just want to caution people. Maybe there might be affected areas. Venus is in Leo, and that speaks of there being like celebrities or famous people even talking about this, or they're kind of being aid given. So there might really be, again, I don't want to see it, but there could be an attack on US soil or some kind of an event or some sort of terror that could be at play. And so for that piece, I just caution people to be careful around that day. Taurus is also related to the land, and Uranus and Mars are both weather correlated planets. So whether it's earthquakes or volcanoes, hurricane season or stuff like that, it might be a day to just lay low. I will say that,
Okay.
but there will be people addressing it, taking care of it, and moving forward from it. And it will be an event that I can see we will be talking about it in the future. And I do have some concerns with the U.S., but we'll be okay. The market will move on from it. It's not the beginning of the Great Depression yet. That's coming, but not yet. But yeah, the countries I mentioned, Israel, Russia, Ukraine, and the USA will be involved or affected by this somehow. So it's more a high level thing. It is more a high level thing. On a lower level, there could be really some unexpected gifts for people, which is interesting. Particularly like Taurus rising signs or people with Taurus placements or Virgo or even Capricorn could be quite favorable for them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, unexpected shifts in leadership. Really, I think that's more who might be affected, and so that'll be interesting to see.
Yes. And to dive further into that, I can recommend everyone to get in contact with you for a personal consultation and relate that to, like you said, specific signs and aspects and progression.
Absolutely.
Please let us know what is your website and what can the viewers sign up for there.
Sure. You can find me at thefinancialastrologer.com. I have a free newsletter on there in which I share views like this about the market. There is a premium subscription for investors who are experienced with investing, and so to help with understanding the market and having that additional edge from the energetic component, right? And being able to predict black swan events like this or see things coming that others might not be able to see if that alpha is of interest to you. There's that premium version as well. And then, of course, I'm on YouTube, The Financial Astrologer. Just type Sama Practical Astrology or The Financial Astrologer and I'll come up. And I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. My screen name on there is Cash Rising. And that's on purpose. You guys should be storing and rising your own cash piles during what we're going through because public places aren't as safe. And that includes the banks, which would be a whole different discussion. But yeah, that's
I
how
will
you
link. I will link to everything you mentioned, and thank you from my heart for attending our small session here today. And I hope we'll be in touch for future aspects and outlooks. You definitely have added depth and significance to what may happen. So thank you, Simon.
My pleasure, Chris. Be in touch.
Take care.